guys, this is TV Siblings Podcast for Mr. Robot. This is Sid.
This is Swetha.
And this is Harini.
So yeah, this was episode 3, titled, I believe, 404 Forbidden. For those unaware, that is the error message when you go to a website that you do not have access for. It's a pretty standard error message. And I think Mr. Robot, when he's talking to us in the beginning, kind of talked about this a little bit, what it is, but in the terms of Elliot and himself. But yeah, let's get our reactions for this third episode. What do you guys think?
I think on the first watch, I thought it was kind of like a mellow episode, not too much happened. But on a rewatch, the second time around, it was actually a really rich episode where a lot of the quotes that, we'll talk about in a bit that Mr. Robot lets us in on, and a lot of character development that happens with Elliot, it was actually a really awesome episode.
Yeah, I agree with you, Swetha. I was surprised when the episode ended. And I was like, that felt short. But I think in that way, it's a compliment that it was actually a really engaging episode and it was a really interesting episode. And I liked seeing the background that I think we really needed on White Rose and how he became to be White Rose. And also see a tender moments that were also much needed from Elliot, more human interaction. And more of a slower piece of the episode, which I liked.
Absolutely. I think we get a more human side to both White Rose and Elliot that we haven't seen in a really long time. Right. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. I actually really liked the episode. I know some people maybe thought it didn't really move the plot, but I don't think that's important. I think for this final season, let Sam Esmail do what he needs to do. There's 13 episodes. We have 10 left. There's plenty of story left. I thought this was a great way of taking a breath and kind of recalibrating our characters and also gaining information. I thought it was great to get some background on White Rose, a little bit of, I guess, some of her motivation and who she was before, which was actually quite different, and we'll jump into that. And I thought it was great to have some light moments with Elliot that was under kind of false pretenses initially. It was under kind of like bad motives, bad intentions of what he was trying to do. But I think it led to something that was very important to Elliot in his growth and kind of getting him back to where he was and maybe even a better place for him overall as we move forward in the season. So I just thought it was actually a really great episode and a lot of texture and detail and character development, kind of what you were alluding to, Swetha.
I think my only criticism is the last episode, they dropped this bomb about this other one, and they didn't talk about that at all this episode, just kind of making us wait a whole episode to get more information on that.
Right.
But to jump right in, the year is 1982, so the episode starts off with a flashback. And just as a reminder, I was curious, what year is this actual series taking place, Mr. Robot? And it's really interesting, actually. The whole series takes place over the course of a single year. And, the 5/9 hack took place in the series on 5/9/2015. And now we're at the end of 2015, Christmas time. But it's 1982, and there's a meeting taking place between Director Zhang and IBM. And the meeting is taking place in the US. And we get some really tender moments between Zhang and his lover when they're in their private hotel room, where they basically both share that they finally feel like they can be themselves in the US. And we also get Zhang's ambition at the time, which was he was interested in becoming ambassador to the US so that they could ultimately move there and live there in peace. And we get some really interesting details where Zhang's lover was actually, and I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys caught his name. I was listening, but I didn't catch his name the whole episode.
Think I did.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think it was given.
But Zhang's lover was the one with the original watch, the one that beep beeps.
Yeah, the Casio watch.
Beeps.
And he was the one that was actually very, very punctual, paying very close attention to the timing of everything. And so I think traits that Zhang picked up from him. At the end of this, kind of beginning scene, Zhang finally reveals himself to his lover. And he tells him, I was waiting for the perfect moment, but you're right, we can be free in the US. And she is in a dress that belonged to her mother. And she's very, very vulnerable. She doesn't know how her lover's going to react, but in a very, very tender moment, you know, he embraces her and accepts who she is, and it was a really nice moment. And I don't know if this ever becomes relevant later on, but the time on the watch when they kiss and White Rose, Zhang finally reveals himself as a woman, the timing is 11:16. So what did you guys think about this opening scene?
Well, just to kind of comment on the time, I'm glad you discussed that. I don't know what that means. I wanted to ask you guys too, but if you guys remember, I think an episode back when Darlene and Elliot are going to the home, or the nursing home where Elliot's mom was staying, the clock is 11:16 as well on there.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's a great catch.
And apparently as well, like, I think when they went back that one time, or when Elliot did and talked with her, it was also showing 11:16. So I don't know if it's just like a bad clock or something, but
no, it was actually a different time.
It was?
Yeah, so the time was different from the first time he went to the second time. The first time, I mean, both times it's a broken clock. It's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time he says, I'm going to have someone take a look at that.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. One of them definitely was 11:16, but I know the other time it was further advanced, but it was still like 11. It was like maybe 11:20 or 11:25.
Okay.
But yeah, there has to be some significance because he zoomed in on that specifically.
Yeah, I don't really know what that is supposed to mean.
But yeah, on the scene itself, I was telling Swetha this when we were watching, and I think I told you this as well, Harini. I actually felt a lot of empathy for White Rose.
Absolutely.
Really?
Why?
I don't know. I didn't feel that.
Well, I think I've never really... I mean, White Rose is clearly the antagonist, and so you don't have a lot of background on her. You just know she's incredibly powerful, ambitious, and wants everything to go her way, and doesn't react very well when it doesn't. But in this situation, she was very vulnerable, and she put herself out there, and I think I think anyone can relate to that. And it actually worked out very well for her when it could have ended very, very badly, but it didn't. At least with her revealing that, you know, she actually feels like this is who she is.
Yeah.
And obviously it was incredibly sad to see that her and her lover couldn't be together due to, you know, the country they live in and the times and the circumstances, which led to someone she really loved and cared about committing suicide. So all that was very sad.
I think, well, now I've been ruminating a little bit. My theory on the 11:16, maybe it's a time, it's just a very symbolic time. It's going to be a symbolic time for White Rose. Maybe that's the time that he wants to pass. He wants to die. Since he's taken up the whole timing thing, being very punctual from his lover, maybe that is a meaningful time for him. If he is going to pass, that will be a time that he's going to pass. And that would, I don't know how much that makes sense, but I guess it kind of makes sense if that was the time on the clock when Elliot and Darlene came, when his mom passed. That was the time on the wall.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The 11:16 in the opening scene cuts to 11:16 in present day, and it's Christmas Eve 2015, and we get a scene with Zhang's assistant and White Rose, and they're basically talking, and Zhang is pointing out that it's really fishy that Philip Price is demanding this Days Group meeting, and that she actually suspects that Price and Elliot might be working together. And initially Zhang kind of hears what she's saying, and she says, you know, decline Philip Price's request. And then the assistant says, you know, yes, you know, we'll figure this out, but it will require patience. And that kind of triggers something for White Rose, where she's like, no, like, I can't do patience. And so the scene ends by Zhang saying, make the Days Group meeting tomorrow. It's Christmas Day, but we're basically going to have to force this along to throw Elliot and Price off their game and force them to make a mistake. And she's like, how are we going to find a successor? And she's like, we'll just make Wellick the successor. But that patience word basically is a big trigger for White Rose, where she thinks back to the day of her lover's wedding, and he's getting married to a woman at his father's request. And they basically, are in that private back room, and he's really opening up to Zhang, and he's like, I don't know how long I can go like this. And essentially Zhang says, I've been named Minister of State Security. I'm not going to be ambassador to the US anymore. And that's basically the final straw that triggers the lover to basically say, like, I can't keep doing this. Like, this isn't the life that I want. And a couple, I think, really key quotes that get brought up. Zhang's lover says, if someone asks for your patience, they are asking for your surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of the reason that White Rose hates patience and is such an impatient and sometimes reckless person, because her life was like significantly changed in this moment when her lover said that.
From this scene, I kind of had a different read on it the first time, but when Zhang tells his lover, yeah, I didn't take that, or whatever, he's not doing the US ambassador job, did you take that as if he was turned down, like he didn't get it, or that he turned down that offer?
He looked disappointed, so I think that he was vying for that job but got turned down and got offered this other job instead, kind of forcing them to stay in China.
Okay.
The reason that I also think that is in that earlier scene where we see them in the hotel room, it seemed like something he really wanted, the ambassador to the US job.
Right. I just wasn't sure with the whole patience thing that he decided to take the security position because it would mean more power for him ultimately in the end, or to be able to do what he wants, whatever that may be at the time. And that's why he asked him to have patience, and probably that's why his lover was frustrated. I don't know.
I think that's another way to take it. It's certainly possible, and I think White Rose carries a lot of guilt about the situation both ways.
Mm-hmm.
If you take it, the way that you're describing it, or that he didn't get offered the job of ambassador. But yeah, White Rose, tries pleading with him, and he says, I will find a way to make the world better for us. And the lover says, this world will never be good enough, and then slits his throat.
So sad.
Also kind of fueling White Rose's ultimate plan to make this world a place that's better. And I think we get a lot of insight into why she's so hell-bent on creating this, whether it's a device or this way of creating this world where people can really be themselves. And especially for her, being a transgender, allowing herself to be who she really is. The scene also highlights White Rose. She sends it as kind of a joke to, her lover as a wedding gift, but also it's a funeral flower. And she's like, I sent it as a joke. But I actually think it's really interesting because she chose that, as a name, and it kind of shows the duality of her character, where on the one hand, it's a symbol of purity and innocence. And historically, it used to actually be a wedding flower and a flower representing love. But now it's more of a funeral flower. And I think she probably chose that because she never wanted to forget that moment. But yeah, kind of an interesting duality and symbol.
The only thing I'll say is, like I was saying, felt empathetic to White Rose and her situation. And yeah, you kind of understand her. She has very emotional reasons that are very strong and raw as to why she's doing what she's doing. A couple things. I think it's still very strange that she wears her mother's clothing. I think that's super weird. And I'm assuming all the other dresses in the past that she showed to DDP, even though she said it was her sister's, must have been her mother's. Mm-hmm. Or maybe ones she's collected over time.
Yeah, she doesn't have a sister.
Yeah.
So you're right about that.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting is this episode, she's wearing her mother's dress and, is getting it ready in the future, or at present time, getting it ready for, the night that the plant will be transferred. Mm-hmm. Previous episode, we have Darlene wearing something of her dead mother's. I wonder if there's any symbolism that he's trying to communicate with us, or just more symmetry amongst the episodes. It could be just that.
I was thinking about that too, where I wonder about the relationship that White Rose had with her mother, because like you said, clearly she feels comfortable wearing her dress, and it's kind of a happy thought and happy memories. And so, in a relationship where a lot of the main characters have complicated relationships with their parents, it is interesting to think about that aspect.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. Good catch, guys.
Yeah, and also we have Elliot, who wears his father's jacket,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of, child-parent symbology that's throughout Mr. Robot.
And definitely thinking about the dress more in detail, this actually gets to Harney's point earlier, where, we didn't actually talk about this, but maybe the reason she wants to wear that dress the night the plant transfers is maybe she actually thinks she's going to see her lover again, where they might get reunited, and she wanted to be in that dress which was so important to her and such an important moment for their relationship.
Yeah, that definitely could be true. The last thing I would just say is Zhang's new assistant is very forward.
Yeah.
Her tone with White Rose was almost like, you are a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
It's just kind of shocking.
And Zhang is pretty patient with her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And probably chose her for this, that she's honest, transparent, and will always speak her mind. With Grant, it was almost like, all right, come on, speak your mind.
Right.
I know you're upset. While there's no pretenses with this new girl, she'll say what's on her mind no matter what. So I thought that was interesting. She's challenges White Rose quite often.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that she's a female for all intents and purposes, and he didn't choose another male partner, another person, like Grant. I wonder why the change, I guess.
I agree with that, where I thought Grant could probably get away with a little bit more honesty because they had that deeper connection and they were in a relationship. I don't know why this girl can get away with saying so much.
I'm not sure.
It's kind of strange. Yeah.
But maybe it's because of that. She had a relationship with Grant and it ended up badly, and that hurt her so much that maybe she wanted to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Someone that she would not have a relationship with, and also would always be honest with her and transparent with her.
I like that.
It's interesting, though. We thought that White Rose and Grant had such a special relationship, but I actually think, in retrospect, that she was probably using him. She probably had some feelings for him, but clearly not as deep as the relationship that we saw highlighted in this episode.
Agreed.
And so the next scene, it cuts to Elliot and Mr. Robot walking on the street, and they bump into Krista. And it's a very awkward scene where she looks really surprised and frightened. And he's trying to tell her, hey, I'm doing a lot better. I'm talking to, Mr. Robot, like you said. And, and she's like, I don't feel safe around you, Elliot. You got to stay away. And he looks really dejected. And he's just like, oh, I just wanted to say thank you for helping me. So a quick scene, but important one later on, because Vera gets tipped into the fact that Krista's an important person to Elliot's life.
This scene broke my heart.
I know.
It made me so sad. He just looked so dejected. And I was like, oh, Elliot. But that made me think even more, what the hell did he do to Krista? I was trying to think back. Is it just she just couldn't handle it anymore? Or she thought he actually had something to do with 5'9"? Was that what it was?
Yeah, Mr. Roa basically said, wake up. Do you really think me with this type of skill set I have didn't cause this or was not involved in some capacity?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the last conversation they had, which probably scared the shit out of her.
So you think it was that? You don't think it was anything more of the third person maybe talking to her at some point and saying something?
You know what? Anything's possible at this point. You might be right.
Because I feel like she was a little more frightened than she would be if it was just she knew that he did the hack and was we just need boundaries. We're not talking anymore. More rational. She seemed really afraid of him.
I actually really like that. Because she's forgiven Elliot for a lot of different things, for completely violating her trust and hacking her. And then we actually see the moment that Cynthia's talking about where Mr. Robot tells her, I did 5'9", and she doesn't seem she seems oh shit, you're a terrorist, but she doesn't seem scared of him in the way she looks genuinely scared of him on the street.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be either way, but that was my first take on it.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, you just feel bad for Elliot.
Yeah.
At the end, towards the end of the scene, before you see DJ, Vera's henchman, He just says, I just wanted to tell you that I'm okay. Or I'm doing better. That's it. That's all he wanted to do. He didn't want to bother her. He didn't want her to be his therapist again. He just wanted to let her know she helped him. That's it. And he thought that was important to convey to her. And I think it really bothers him that he didn't get that opportunity in a proper manner.
Right.
And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on this. This whole episode, one of the major themes is healing, right? And I was thinking about, Siddha's theory that the other one is a version of Elliot. And it would be like a really great thing for the series as a whole for this version of Elliot as the other one to be like a more complete and calm and secure and whole version of Elliot. But that's so incongruous with every other piece of data that we have. We talked about the other one could have been the one that had a massive meltdown and broke all the computers in the server room. The other one, like you were saying, Harney, could have been the one that really terrified Krista to the point where she can't even talk to Elliot on the street. I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me because I'm hoping it would really be nice for the show to come full circle and have Elliot be like a more complete person at the end of the show. But I don't know. It's kind of interesting that they're setting up, potentially, if we're reading this right, like this like wilder version of Elliot being the other one.
So I think kind of got a good nickname out of that, Helliot, as the alter ego. I like that.
I get what you're saying. I kind of take it a different way in that I think that's the whole point of the final season. I think it's to get Elliot to a better place. And we know that there's at least 4 aspects of him broken up into 4 personalities. And I think the whole point of the show or the final season is unification. Mm-hmm. Bringing all of those parts together to make Elliot whole again. Because he was fractured at some point in his life. And he has never been the same or never been whole ever since then. And I think that's what that meant, in my opinion, at the end of the last episode when he says, they're not ready. They're not ready to come together. They're not ready to work together and make Elliot whole again. And I do agree, though, that not only was this episode about healing, I think the first 3 episodes so far have been about healing. I've noticed a theme where you can even say it's a theme within a theme with Krista. He wanted healing with Krista. Yeah. He wanted to have that emotional connection again. We saw it last episode with Darlene, getting that emotional connection. Darlene needed more than Elliot, but Elliot, he benefited from that connection being stronger or being reestablished. And then, we're going to get to it, but later in this episode when he meets Olivia, again, emotional connection that leads to Elliot becoming a better version of himself, healing in some capacity. So it seems like we're moving Elliot to a place where he's just gonna be ready for something in a better place, emotionally, in every aspect. Whether that's to be ready to go after White Rose or Dark Army, I don't know. It may be something bigger than that. I think it may be just for him just to be whole.
So you think that, like Swetha was saying, this other or third person is a better version of Elliot, a calmer, more relaxed person? No. Okay. No, I
don't think so. But I do think he needs all aspects of his personality. Mm-hmm. What he's been fighting with himself the entire show is Mr. Robot or himself. That's always been this tug of war struggle. But what he doesn't know is actually there's other personalities within him that he was also fighting with. And I think he needs to not only come to acceptance of those personalities, but somehow have some kind of unification where they all come together. And then he's like in his ultimate form or his purest form, and maybe, where he's become his true self.
Maybe this other one is like all his repressed anger.
Yeah.
And he just, as a kid, like he didn't know how to deal with the stuff going on with his dad. And it, like you said, like it kind of fractured his personality. And maybe this was like a version of himself that he just bottled up and never dealt with. And so maybe, like you said, coming full circle at the end of the show, maybe he actually just deals with that part of his personality and becomes more whole. That's interesting. Yeah.
That's how I take it.
I'm curious now. Elliot has definitely seen little Elliot and his mom. Like he's seen them, I guess you would call them in hallucinations. and hearing them in front of him, does he recognize that as part of his personality? Or does he only see Mr. Robot as part of his personality?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. I don't know.
I think he does view them differently
Mm-hmm.
because he doesn't really interact with them, right? He
Right.
sees them more in very transient, fleeting moments where they're almost telling him stuff and he's kind of reacting to it, as opposed to Mr. Robot, which has been such a central and active role in his life this past year.
And as far as we know, the young Elliot and his mom have not had the ability to take over Elliot and take control. Maybe I mean, we're assuming the other one can, or he must have, but so far, the only person we can confirm doing that is Mr. Robot.
And we also believe, based on the 4 seats at the end of episode 2 in that boardroom, that Elliot's mom is not one of the people to be seated at that table. It would be young Elliot, Mr. Robot, and the third person.
I'm not so sure. I think that maybe the mom sits there and maybe Elliot's not ready to sit there.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I kind of viewed it. But it could be what you're saying. I just assume those 4 seats are for the 4 aspects of his personality, and all 4 of them make up Elliot.
I see.
Think of that table as Elliot's mind.
Right.
That's how I take it.
Sorry, we're talking about the other episode now, but that was such a crazy episode. I still don't understand like what we were seeing. Like, was that in Elliot's mind? Like, what was that? Why were we the ones there seeing it, not him? So many questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in the words of Sherlock, I think that was Elliot's mind palace in some capacity.
Could be.
Yeah.
So coming back to this episode, the next scene is Elliot with Darlene at Allsafe, and Darlene lets us know about Olivia Cortez, who works at Cyprus National Bank, and she's Susan Jacobs' contact, but also the Deus' group's U.S. account manager. And she basically says, you know, the way for us to get access to the Cyprus National Bank is to go through Olivia. And she says, you know, we have to break into her apartment, and I'm going to be the one that does that. And Elliot threatens her and is like, no, you're not going to do that. And once again scares her. And Elliot and Darlene are actually very distant in this moment, where Elliot says something really messed up to her when he's leaving, and he's like, I should have never opened the door when you came back into town. And basically pushing her away as far as possible and making it clear that, you know, they're not on good terms.
Yeah, the scene was interesting because, you know, it was tough to see the way he was interacting with Darlene. You know, it's tough to see him pushing away Darlene like that, especially considering Darlene is actually in a fragile state.
Mm-hmm.
She really needs her brother, and she needs this. She needs a goal to focus on,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of overcome what she's going through. But at the same time, I kind of agree with Elliot's actions in a way. I don't agree with the delivery. He was hurting her, scaring her. You know, I don't think that was needed, but he's willing to go to those extremes right now to get his point across. He's done that, you know, throughout the first 3 episodes. And he's protecting her because in reality, Darlene is reckless. She makes a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand the seriousness of what's happening because obviously she does not know that White Rose killed Angela.
Right.
And she doesn't really fully get the stakes. Obviously she saw Cisco die in front of her, but she doesn't know about Angela. She doesn't know all the intricacies of everything. And for her, just like, no, I'll just do it. It's easy. It's like, Elliot's like, you don't fucking get it. You don't understand what you're doing. And I'd rather trust myself and not put you in harm's way.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think that's been on Elliot's mind for a very, very long time. You know, when he says out loud, I should never have opened my door when you came back into New York. That's actually something that Angela says in season 1 to Darlene when they're trying to find Elliot, and he goes off to his home in Washington Township. And this is before he knows who Mr. Robot is. And, well, he knows he's his father. He doesn't know that he's not real. And they're searching for him. And Angela says to Darlene, like, he's never been the same since you came back into town.
Yeah.
You know? And it always goes back to that. That was the catalyst. And in reality, a lot of this is Darlene's fault. And I think at some point, she needs to take some responsibility for that.
I agree with that. Sid, that you love this phrase. I feel like Darlene's like the agent of chaos in Elliot's life, like always stirring stuff up and never really thinking things through, and then just being really, really reckless.
See, her problem is she always puts up a front. The only time I think I've ever seen her be real with someone else, when she told that random story to Cisco when they were waiting at the hospital about how some lady basically kidnapped her and she was happy. But then she kept thinking she would never see Elliot.
Yeah.
She loves Elliot so much. She adores him.
Mm-hmm.
But she puts up this front of how strong she is and how powerful she is. But she never lets herself just be real and vulnerable to Elliot. And there's very rare moments. I mean, the previous time was when she was just having a hard time with Angela's death and everything. But she just always puts up this front. And it's just fake. Like, Darlene also needs to come to grip with who she is. And just be honest with Elliot, and they'll actually come together a lot better. But right now, they're really clashing.
Even Mr. Robot, as they're walking into, Olivia's apartment, he is basically having this monologue where he's pointing out that Elliot was the one that was kind of out of line in that.
Yeah.
He's like, Elliot's lost everyone. His mom, his dad, his sister, his girlfriend, all of his friends. And Elliot's the one that's kind of walling himself off more and more. And Mr. Robot says, the more he restricts everyone's access, the less vulnerable he'll be. But if you block everyone out, what's the point of existing? Like, what's the point of doing any of this? And so Mr. Robot, being that part of Elliot's personality, is struggling with that. It's like, why are you pushing everyone away and completely walling yourself off, alienating yourself? Like, he's realizing that this is not good for Elliot to do.
Yeah, Mr. Robot knows why, and Elliot knows why. He just doesn't want to get hurt again.
Yeah.
After Angela, he can't do this. He can't have someone else he cares about get hurt again. You're going to say something, Hardy?
I was just saying, do you think that it's a little unnerving that when Mr. Robot says that he lists all these people are dead? The only person that's not is Darlene. So does that mean something, that he's looped her in with all these people who've passed away in his life? Or do you think it's more just like a metaphor?
Correct. I think he's just saying that, their relationship is very broken and they're not really there for each other right now.
Or I thought this is where you were going, foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Darlene's on the clock.
I mean, I think everyone is, right?
Yeah, and Darlene right now, unfortunately, is a weakness for Elliot. And something that White Rose could take advantage of.
But I do think that's really interesting that you bring that up from season 1, that in a way Darlene kind of triggered everything. I wonder what the significance of that, and if she is going to tie into this third person, and how that's revealed. And I don't think it's a coincidence that she was able to talk to this third person, or she had an interaction with this third person.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, that could be something huge. That's actually a great point. Yeah.
And the birth of this Mr. Robot persona, when, that Halloween night, when Elliot puts on the jacket and puts on the mask and then comes up with this idea, that was in Darlene's presence. And
right.
Darlene triggered that part of him as well.
No, I was just going to say, just add to that, it's interesting because when she did talk about, like, oh yeah, like when I told you about Vera, she didn't add anything else to that. She wasn't like, yeah, like you're being really like scary that night, or you're being really weird. She's like, oh yeah, like don't you remember I talked to you that night? Like, so that tells me that it was like a very normal version of Elliot, that she couldn't tell the difference, which is even crazier actually if you think about it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's very true. I think I said last week, or the last episode, maybe that night where they puts the mask on and the jacket, that was actually the fourth personality. Mm-hmm. Could have it backwards, and actually the fourth personality existed before Mr. Robot, that the one that we've seen and familiar with. And maybe that night the father version was created. But maybe up to that point, maybe the one was involved with him jumping out of the bedroom at the theater. Maybe that personality has always been with him from the beginning. Maybe. Yeah. It could be reversed.
And so going back to Olivia's apartment, they're, looking around, looking for this device, and Elliot breaks into Olivia's computer, and you find out that Olivia is a single mom She's worked really hard to get this job at the bank. She's spent 3 years in night school to get this job. And Elliot finds out that she may have a drug addiction and that she could lose custody of her kid if it was ever known that she was using drugs. And ultimately, Elliot and Mr. Robot come to the conclusion that they have to physically see Olivia and try to get access to this physical device. And so they go to the bar where she's supposed to meet Evan for an OkCupid date. And Elliot doesn't think about any other options other than a very aggressive approach of blackmailing her. And he wants to threaten her, saying, you know, I'm going to make your drug addiction public and you might lose custody of your kid. And Mr. Robot's the one that's like, whoa, like, why don't we try a different approach? Why don't we just try talking to her? And Elliot's like, no, we don't have time for that. And so he just walks over and he's just like staring at Olivia. And Olivia's like, can I help you? And then Mr. Robot just jumps in, super smooth, and starts sweet talking her, and is like the ultimate wingman, where he just opens the door for Elliot to sit down and have a nice conversation. And Olivia and Elliot have a lot in common. It is crazy how much they have in common. And it's really nice because one thing I noticed in the interactions between the two of them, Elliot's completely honest with her.
Yeah.
Like, almost too much, where he's like, there was like a lull in the conversation, and he's like, I'm a morphine addict, and she's like, how long have you been clean? He's like, well, 2 days ago, I was held down and forced to do heroin. And she just takes it all in stride, and I think, she just really isn't scared by Elliot. She does think he's crazy and she does think he's weird, but she's very like accepting of him in a very, very rare and unique type of way.
I think she finds him really refreshing because he's just so
Yeah,
real,
I agree with that.
Definitely. And we find out more about Olivia, but Olivia and Elliot, they both lost a parent they were really, really close to. And as a result, they both became distant from the other parent. And they both dealt with drug addiction, which essentially stemmed from severe depression for both of them. And they both had suicidal ideation at different moments in their life. And so they actually have a ton in common. And they essentially sleep together. Elliot, and this part kills me, Elliot does end up using her. He steals the key fob and texts Darlene the information, and I really just feel so bad for Olivia because if she were to ever find out, like, this would be really hurtful to her to know that Elliot wasn't being entirely honest and genuine with her the whole time.
Those were good calls.
Yeah, but still hard to understand from Olivia's perspective. And even Mr. Robot's shocked. He's like, who would have thought that Olivia would be the one to override Elliot's attempts to forbid access?
I didn't really understand that line.
I think, the whole episode, the title's Forbidden, and it's basically Elliot saying no one can get inside.
Oh,
like,
gotcha.
not going to let anyone in, not going to let anyone in. But to some degree, he did let Olivia in, and it was really nice. They did share some moments of true connection. And I think Elliot can't keep treating people like they're nothing, right? Like, we saw he was very callous towards Freddie Lomax, where he was like, he deserved it. Right. And I think with Olivia, he's not going to be that way, where he's not going to treat her just as some person to be used and manipulated, where she's an actual person. She's been through a lot. And like we were talking about earlier, a big moment of healing for Elliot.
Do you think we'll see Olivia again?
I think we probably will. I just hope that it's not in a bad way, where the show tends to be really dark, and hopefully it's not a situation where Olivia finds herself in danger, or it could also just be that Olivia finds out that Elliot stole this from her and was just using her.
Right.
Yeah, so I thought all the scenes with Olivia were amazing. I thought it was great to see these light moments with Elliot. Like you were saying, Swetha, he was very comfortable with her. Even like the moment where he says, there's a lull in the conversation, and he brings up that he's addicted to morphine. You could see him like just wanting to say something in the moment, and halfway through him saying I'm addicted to morphine, he like pauses a second and kind of realizes this is really stupid. I shouldn't be saying this. And then by the time he finishes the sentence, he like closes his eyes like shit. Like I shouldn't have said that. Like he was embarrassed. And you know, she makes a joke, so do you have any? And he says, oh no. And he just looks shocked. But then she grabs his arm and says, oh, look at your face. And he quickly looks down, like, kind of shocked that she grabbed him, but doesn't say anything, which I thought was a pleasant surprise. We know how Elliot feels about people touching him, but he just was okay with it. I mean, for an instant, it bothered him, but he's kind of let go. And even later on, when she says, you know, you're not like other people, you know, or he says, like, you know, I'm not like other people, and she's like, I'm picking that up. He doesn't take that the wrong way. He kind of likes that she says that. Yeah. And because he smiles. Or he smiles as much as Elliot does smile. But, you know.
More like his smirk.
His smirk, yeah. It actually made him, like, really happy. Yeah. You know, because I think he felt accepted, right, by her. He didn't feel judged. It's funny because I kept thinking with the music and the way it was filmed and the environment, if I just came in and just saw the scene, I didn't know what show it was from, I didn't know anything about the background, I would think that this is like a CW show or like a very awkward like black comedy, because he was like, oh yeah, my mother died yesterday. He's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. He's like, why? You know, he just wasn't like getting it. You know, she's like, oh, for you, like the mother thing. It's like, oh, it's okay. We weren't close.
That's so awesome.
So I think these little details were just like hilarious.
Yeah.
And yeah, when he kind of opens up to Olivia, and he opens up to Olivia when Olivia opens up to him. He says something that he's never said to anybody on the entire show. I don't think he's ever said out loud, but it's obviously something that's been hinted at when he says, I know what it feels like to hate yourself. And what I thought was very interesting about that is, in reality, in the entire show, the only person that he's incredibly honest and transparent with is us, the silent observer that he created. He tells us everything. He's very honest with everything. But then he tells this person that he just met that night, yeah, I also know what that feels like. I've hated myself, or I do hate myself. He's never said that to anybody, ever. And so I thought that was a huge step for Elliot in his just like emotional healing. A very twisted thing that Sam Esmail could do is if she's Dark Army.
No.
And that this was all
Don't say
fake and a ruse. Anything's possible. I definitely don't want it. I do think we're going to see Olivia again. And I was telling this to Swetha, I know how much of a fan Sam Esmail is of Fight Club. I could totally see them reconnecting on New Year's, and you know, some crazy shit's happening with whatever Elliot's execute with his plan, and like one of the final scenes is just them together. And you know, Where's My Mind is playing very much like how it did at the end of Fight Club. I don't think he's going to do the exact same scene, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did his own version of that scene with Olivia, because Olivia has some similarities to the character in Fight Club.
And what's the line at the end? It's like, you met me at a very interesting time in my life.
I could totally see him saying that same line. I could totally see that, and I would be very happy with that, because I love that scene.
I actually think like Olivia's perfect for Elliot.
Yeah.
If only.
I do worry that it's going to come back, that she's going to find out about him taking the authentication key, or, you know, she's getting in trouble for it. I think there will be some repercussions, unfortunately.
I think there's going to also be repercussions with Darlene if she finds out that Angela has been dead this whole time.
That's true too. I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
What do you mean by that? I think Darlene's come to terms with the fact that Angela's dead.
No, but Elliot has known this whole time definitively that she was killed by White Rose and has kept that from her. You know, I feel like that can form some tension if she ever found out about that.
Yeah.
Another thing, it's a small thing. It's kind of us as, you know, we're friends with Elliot. We're kind of rooting for him. It was kind of cool to see him kind of make it through a social situation and come out okay on the other side. Because the only other time he's ever attempted that. I think it's from the very first episode of the entire show where Angela asks him to come to her birthday party or something at some club with the Josh Groban guy, whatever his name is.
Ollie.
He can't even step inside.
Yeah.
You know, he can't even step inside. So for him to do this, I think it was huge.
Well, even after the scene at the bar, Mr. Robot's like,
Yeah.
that went better than I thought it would.
Yeah.
And then Elliot rushes outside and kisses her.
That
Yeah.
was such
great.
an epic
It was
moment.
great. That's what I'm saying. It felt like, I don't know, like a mid-2000s
I love
romantic movie. We're just happy for Elliot. I think that's the thing.
He deserves some happiness.
Yeah.
And an in-between scene that we get is a scene with the long-awaited Vera.
Yeah.
And it's at is it a Mexican restaurant?
Yeah, it's the same Mexican restaurant where Shayla was basically being held hostage.
Vera's dressed up as a drugged-up Santa, and he's putting drugs into chickens.
Turkeys. Was it turkeys or chickens?
Oh, is
I
that
think it
his
was
chickens?
Chickens, yeah.
And we get a little bit of insight into what he's doing back in the area. And he has big ambitions as well. He wants to be king of New York. Not quite sure what that means, whether that means drug overlord or, you know, what exactly that means. And he wants Elliot to be his architect. We also find out that he wants Elliot to be willing in his participation. He wants him to be a partner and not a prisoner. And this is the scene where Vera learns that Krista is someone important to Elliot. And it's interesting, he's looking at her picture and he says, she knows something I gotta know. And we don't know how he's gonna use this information and what he's gonna do with it. Did you guys have any thoughts on this scene?
I just love every single line Vera ever delivers. He delivers it in the most unique way. When he's yelling at DJ to, like, you know, kind of paint the picture of what he saw so that Vera could pull details. He's like, the details, man. It's like I forgot the phrase he uses, but I was like cracking up. Like, because I think the phrase, like, the devil's in the details.
Yeah, the devils.
Yeah, and then he says, shit's in that devil or something. He says something.
He says it
super-
backwards.
Like,
or
he mixes
something.
it up.
Yeah.
He says it backwards, but
I also love the point he makes. He's like, how's a little kid gonna look at this picture and see something you can't see?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Although I was kind of disappointed. I thought there was going to be more to Vera coming back because I was like, this can't be just a coincidence. And the way that they played it out, it did seem like it was kind of a coincidence, or in the sense like, yeah, I don't really get like why now he wants to come back to New York. It would have made a lot more sense if he's been planning something with the third Elliot or third version of Elliot, but I guess not.
Yeah, we're definitely wrong in that theory,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
and then the final scene is back at Elliot's apartment where we see an overly excited Wellick just jumping with joy that he got the CEO job at E-Corp and basically can't contain himself. He's like, Elliot, this is the moment.
It's so funny.
We can take them down, finally. And Elliot's
I was
like
like,
doing
"Shut the
everything he
fuck
can to be
up."
like, stop.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing that was leading into the scene was Mr. Robot talking to us and saying, like you mentioned, Swetha, that Olivia kind of got through to him, and he's kind of happy that Elliot's actually, you know, healing
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. But as they're heading back to the headquarters, all safe, where Darlene's at, they stop because Elliot says that Van's been following us, which is clearly Dark Army. The one small thing I thought was interesting about that is Mr. Robot seemed surprised. I was confused by that. Whatever Elliot sees, Mr. Robot should see. And
Right.
how did Mr. Robot not notice a very obvious looking van following them?
I was thinking about that. Like, why is it always a white van? Why can't they be in like a less conspicuous car?
I think it's part of the brashness of Dark Army. They just don't care,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like,
that's
fuck
fair.
it.
That's fair.
The other thing I kept thinking was, how many damn times is Wellick gonna break into Elliot's apartment? And my first thought was like, dude, Elliot's gotta teach Wellick how to pick locks. He keeps breaking his door every time. And the second thing I thought was, It's like the middle of the night. Does Wellick always have to wear like the most expensive suit possible everywhere he goes?
He has to look nice for Elliot. Don't you remember?
Oh yeah, that's true. I totally forgot about that. I forgot. You're right.
So
You're 100% right. I forgot about that.
It was actually, just to make one more point about that, it was actually really jarring to see when Wellick was a prisoner and he was like in sweatpants.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
who is
It felt-
this guy?
it felt wrong.
It's weird.
It felt very wrong.
Two things. First thing, I had already talked to you about this before, but I thought it was very odd that Wellick would not be aware that people are following them or people are listening in on them. Like, he should know better. He's actually worked very closely with Dark Army, so I thought that was a little
Absolutely.
off.
It seems really out of character and just like a huge, I don't know, mistake that someone like Wellick wouldn't normally make.
Yeah, I was like, that was a little weird. I don't know. Maybe he just thought like it's at Elliot's home, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you
I
explain
think
that.
maybe it's that Dark Army actually wasn't trailing Elliot's every move up until this moment when Zhang's assistant was like, we need to start tailing him again. And so maybe they like let their guard up. That's the only explanation I can think of.
So
That makes sense.
I think you guys were kind of alluding to it, but this whole van that Elliot saw, but Mr. Robot did not see. Do you think that it wasn't even there?
No, it's definitely there.
I think it was there.
You think it's there?
Yeah.
I think to explain the discrepancy between what Elliot sees and what Mr. Robot sees, I think they don't always have the same awareness. That's just how the show's chosen to take the take that the show has
Yeah.
on the dual personalities, where there are things that Elliot picks up on that Mr. Robot doesn't, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Where
that.
this season is the first time where they're in full communication, so they're almost always on the same page, but not always. And we clearly see like Mr. Robot has all these thoughts about Elliot and what he's doing and how he's behaving and how he's reacting that he's not openly sharing with Elliot or talking to him about. And so there is still a little bit of a divide there.
Yeah, kind of a tangent, but going back to the overall emotional healing theme, emotional connections Elliot's been getting, a guy with Darlene, Olivia, in a way tried to do it with Krista, but that didn't work. I think the next person could be Wellick, getting an emotional connection and some kind of resolution with Wellick or coming to an understanding, common ground. Wellick, as we know, adores a version of Elliot, but I think is equally frustrated with the other side of Elliot. So maybe they come to some kind of cohesion where, they're friends, or I don't know, at least come to an understanding. I think we're going to see that potentially in the next episode.
Another very complicated relationship between father and son. I was just thinking about that one conversation we saw between Wellick and Mr. Robot that was so important and special to Wellick. And it's the story where he shares about his father and the red wheelbarrow and that poem. But Wellick hates his father, absolutely hates him. Like, the biggest motivating factor in his whole life has been, I want to be nothing like him.
Yeah.
I don't want to settle for that simplicity. And so it's really interesting how we see that theme over and over again.
So before we move on, Hernie, I think you had a crockpot theory you wanted to go over based off the end of last episode.
Yes, I do. So basically, I think that this third person or third persona of Elliot is another version of Elliot, but my crockpot theory is potentially at some point Elliot might have had a twin, whether it's the young Elliot that we see, so not necessarily that is the twin, but maybe around that age the twin had passed away or something had happened, or even in the womb something happened. But that's my theory, and potentially whatever had happened to his brother had caused some strain or resentment from the mom towards Elliot as the surviving twin, or whatever that may be, and cause a bad relationship between the two of them. But yeah, I don't know, that was pretty much my theory. And also I think we know that Elliot, whenever his like online name is Sam Sepinwall, I think.
Sepinwall.
Sepiol. Sam Sepiol.
Sam Sepinwall. Edit that out.
We're keeping it.
It's
official.
His online name is Sam Sepiol. And I think Sweta had gone to sleep at this point, but Sweta and I were talking about. Sorry, not to call you out, but to fill you in, Sweta. Sweta was asking me, do you think that the real life characters of Rami Malek and Christian Slater knew from the beginning that there was going to be a third person, and do you think that influenced the way that they were acting since season 1? And I think we both agreed that yes, they probably did know. And it seems like Sam Esmail is very an interactive person and likes to put his personal touches in the show, so it wouldn't be beyond him, or I would believe that the name Sam might have come from even Rami's real twin brother, whose name is Sammy, and incorporate that into the show as his online name and probably alter persona or another persona. That's my crockpot theory.
A couple things.
I like it.
A couple things.
You guys always make fun of crockpot, but what exactly is a crackpot?
It's just a term.
What is a crackpot?
It's just a term.
It's just
or like a crazy theory.
It's a crackpot
kind of like
theory.
a borderline implausible theory.
Yeah.
Anyways, to address that crockpot theory, I think you talked about this where one of the things that doesn't really fit is Darlene, who is a reliable narrator for the most part in terms of what happened in their history. I feel like even if she was really young at the time, that she would have found out at some point that they had a brother who died. And just the fact that that's never been referenced before goes a little bit against that possibility.
Not entirely. There's a lot about their past that Darlene hasn't talked about. When Elliot randomly brought up Kevin McAllister, the snowman, to Darlene, she was shocked. And she's like, oh, do you want to talk about it? Because she knew the significance of that for what happened that day. And Elliot had no interest in talking about it. And that wasn't resolved to the end of that season where Darlene says, no, you didn't get pushed out the window. You jumped. And so I think there could be elements of the past that haven't been revealed or Darlene just hasn't talked about. So it might be. It's kind of a stretch that they would bring it up now. You know, a third sibling.
I don't think it's too far-fetched either that it would be a thing where Darlene was not even born yet or something. And it would be too far-fetched if their family is not very typical. It might be something that was never discussed after that. Maybe it was a tragic circumstance and they just never brought it up. I can see his mom not bringing it up at all and just kind of silently resenting Elliot for it. But yeah, and then another thing that we were discussing is, I don't know if you remember this, Sweta. I think it was in season 1 when Elliot, he just carries a family photo in his room. And this is kind of before Darlene, he figures out Darlene's his sister, I think. But it's just a picture of them at the beach, and it's his mom, his dad, and then him, but no Darlene. At an age where Darlene would have been alive and like maybe like 6 or something.
I don't think his dad was in the picture. I think it was just him and his mom.
Was it? I think it was just the 3 of them. I don't know. I don't remember.
I think it was initially. And then later on, I think
the dad was
his
in there.
dad and Darlene showed up once he started to remember stuff. But I think it was just him and his mom.
I had to look into that because I feel like Darlene was not ever there. That was a weird scenario.
Yeah, I think initially she was never there. It was just him and his mom. That's it.
I think the other thing is, in terms of Sam Sepiol, that's how you say it, by the way.
Whatever.
Not Sam Sepiwal. But they all have aliases. Like Darlene is Dolores Hayes, I think, and even Angela had Claudia Kincaid or something.
Yeah, Claudia Kincaid.
So they all have names that are aliases of themselves. So I don't think that necessarily means that that's the name of his personality or something like that.
No,
doesn't mean it's not.
Definitely doesn't, but who knows?
Yeah. So any final thoughts, guys, before we wrap it up?
Should we talk about the trailer?
Sure. So the trailer was quick, which I like. They're keeping it short so not to reveal too much. Looks like Wellick, Mr. Robot, and Elliot are on the run in the snow somewhere.
Ominous.
Yeah. And we also see Darlene showing up at his apartment thinking that Elliot's dead. She looks at some note, which I think is a note that Elliot wrote to Wellick saying they're listening.
Right.
and she's telling this to someone, and my guess is she's telling this to DDP
Yeah.
because she probably has nowhere else to turn and wants DDP's help in finding Elliot.
Right. And you see, just to follow up on that, it seems like they're dropped off in the middle of some woods or something like that. And you see it's like Wellick in the foreground, Mr. Robot, and Elliot in the background, all three of them coming up to like a house or something. And this was in some of the previews before even the season aired, but the scene of one of those white trucks that we see, or white vans following them around everywhere, whatever the contents were inside is just going up in flames. Very curious. I feel like next week's episode is going to be a big turning point episode.
I think so. I think a lot of stuff's going to happen in next week's episode.
Right. I'm excited.
Cool. I think that's it, guys, right?
Yeah. I have one final question before we close.
Yeah.
Do you think,
for sure.
When do you think we're going to find out the third person?
I think they're going to wait to reveal it until...
Really?
Yeah. I think it's going to be like the 11th or 12th episode.
Wow. It's like really towards the end.
I think so too. I think it's going to be a while, maybe.
There's so much like action stuff to cover. The Deus group meeting might happen next episode, or they might even wait because we didn't get a sense of that at all in the trailer. So that's going to be a big thing. And then, yeah, like if the Deus group meeting is happening tomorrow, why are they all in the woods and what's happening there? So there's like so much of the plan that they have to cover that I think the reveal of the other one is going to wait for a while, unfortunately.
Okay. I have no idea, so yeah, but that makes sense.
No, I think that makes sense, yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll upload this as soon as we can. This is Sid.
This is Sweta.
And this is Harini. Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.